Hello, everyone. This is Endgame number 15 of the 100 Endgames you must know. We are covering uh, each of these Endgames, and today we are going over the last of the Rook Pawn versus Knight endings. And yeah, we've gone through scenarios where Rook Pawn on the 6th rank versus a Knight, how that is off or can often be a draw, and how if it's a Rook Pawn on the 7th versus a Knight, it can often be a draw. And we've even looked at a scenario where it's a Rook Pawn versus Knight, and it's checkmate for the side with the Knight. So it seems like the side with the Knight can usually hold. But what if the side with the Knight has the Knight on the worst possible square? And in this case, which is often the case, the worst possible square, other than like the opposite side of the board, is the feet and kettle square. In this case, it's B7. So B7, G7, G2, B2, the feet and kettle square for the Knight is what the author dubs the dumb square. So let's look at what happens. Well, not look. Yeah, as you can see on the board, we can see what happens. That's how I should phrase it. We can see what happens. As you can see on the board, it's white to move, and in this position, after white pushes, the Knight is so clumsy on the feet and kettle square. There's nothing the Knight can do. If the Knight moves literally anywhere, as you can see, there's no possible way for the Knight to stop the pawn. And if the king walks over, the pawn can actually use the Knight to shield the king from coming closer. Because, well, okay, it's not that bad because the king is within the square. The king is within the square. The king is within the square. But the Knight actually blocking the king's ability to stop the pawn. So a very, very, very cool case that no, it is not always a draw with a Rook Pawn versus Knight. Even with the Knight and king close to the pawn, it's not always a draw especially when the Knight is on the dumb square. If the Knight was on the square, of course, already, let's give black one more tempo. The Knight is on c5, then of course it's a draw, but it is not in this case because of this sequence. So, okay, let's look at one more example. Just another example that's on the other side of the board. The king is a bit closer from behind, but once again, it's white to move. White pushes, and there is simply nothing to be done here because the Knight once again blocks off the king from guarding the promotion square. And of course, if you move it anywhere, it is too late. Actually, positions like this, really funnily enough, like it's beneficial for the king not to be close to the pawn, because if it was, then maybe there could be some like knight checks to win the pawn after the knight moves. But the fact that the king is so far away is actually very beneficial in this case. So really cool pattern to know. Really good concept to know that hey, this ending is not always a draw, especially when the Knight is on the dumb poo poo square. Okay, that is endgame number 15. We're going to be covering queen versus pawn endings in the next one. So exciting stuff.